didn't wash anyone's feet, but I did offer them a hamantashen, like Abraham and Sarah. I have something to say about today's Haftarah, and I'm sorry I missed its recitation. So the Haftarah takes place in a political context of the 9th century BCE under the reign of Achav and Izebel. And in the Haftarah, we read the story of the prophet Eliyahu's challenge to the prophets of King Achav and his wife Izebel in the 9th century. And in most years, we focus on the second half, when Eliyahu, virtually alone now after the Phoenician Izebel's murderous purge of the Israelites' prophets, when Eliyahu initiates a dramatic contest with the prophets of Achav to prove the existence of the one true God, El, with our God winning the contest, and Baal proven a false god by his prophets ultimately proving feckless. In fact, when I went to my Jewish learning to get the summary, it only talked about the second half and didn't even mention the first half. That's how often we naturally, by reflex, go to the second half. So the connection to the golden calf story of the Parsha seems obvious: a false god of the calf versus the true God of Moshe. This year, however, my attention was drawn to the first half. As I can see, I'm not alone. In other regions of the ancient Near East at this time, prophets often served as mere instruments of the king, essentially cogs in an authoritarian structure. The authoritarian king wants a magic trick, think Egypt back in the court of Pharaoh, or wants an oracle to know when to wage battle, cue the entrails. No accident that the entrails are burned on the altar and we're not allowed to eat them in the temple. Or wants it political advice that already agrees with the king's desires. Think of Jeremiah's being thrown in prison by King Zedekiah for not agreeing with his alliance with Egypt. Any failure of perfect success in oracles or in perfect agreement with the king's own views resulted in imprisonment or death. But in Israel, there is a highly unusual development. The prophets evolve as essentially a third branch of the power structure to provide checks and balances to the other two structures of priesthood and monarchy. Essentially speaking truth to power, they rely on a mediation role between the people and God, which they inherit all the way from the Torah and from Moshe, and therefore have the ability to critique the king. Essentially, they represent the people and they represent God, and that's their check and balance, and thus rely on their authority not so much from the king alone, but from the support of the people, whom they equally serve. And that's why Eliyahu and Elisha after him, they go around healing people and helping people and being connected to the people, because that's where they gain their authority. Remembering this, looking at the first half of the Haftarah as equally important as the second act brings us to the following. Where are we? The king has fired the royal prophets, the interface between executive branch and the people, who typically serve a nonpartisan role. The prophets should be nonpartisan in the Torah, and the king fires them all, actually kills them all, and replaces them not with true prophets, but with sycophants, 450 of them, modeled after the authoritarian regimes surrounding Israel, and due in large part from foreign influence that is not normal, come from Phoenicia. The influence that there, a prophet should agree and do what the king says, not what this Israelite tradition is, Achav, that you inherited. So says Izebel. The sycophants claim to have real authority, but they are emperors with no clothes. Who appointed them? Where did they get their authority to be doing what they're doing? Like the golden calf, in contrast to Moshe, it's an orgy of firings and grand claims to larger purposes, but there's no real plan or structure to the reorganization. And as a result, the economy tanks for 3 full years. That's in the Parsha. All this should be enough action to lead to the climactic confrontation when the sole remaining independent prophet of the people emerges. But actually, much of the Haftarah has a large intermediary step, which is Ovadia. Ovadia, who still works in the king's government, has kept silent. We are told he actually in his heart is true to the one God and wishes Eliyahu only well, but he has hidden all this and remains in the king's court. When Eliyahu demands just only that he deliver a message to the king that Eliyahu is ready to meet, Ovadia begs Eliyahu to withdraw the request. To deliver that would show that he is in contact with Eliyahu. To do so would reveal that he has any sympathy or connection whatsoever with the opposition, and therefore he too would be subject to purge. Ovadia is the parallel to Aaron in the golden calf story. He cannot speak up while the mob is at work. He must seem to agree with the mob, if nothing else than for self-preservation. What would it help for him to quit anyway? But the open question for all of us is, what does it help for him to stay if he doesn't speak up? This is the great question we face today, particularly those in power in our government. Is there any effect to speaking up? What are the consequences for staying silent?